In the year 1324, a man left the city of Mali on a pilgrimage to Mecca. This was not, in itself, unusual. The Hajj, the Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca, was a religious obligation for Muslims who could afford it, and rulers across the Muslim world had made the journey for centuries. What made this pilgrimage different was its scale. The man was Musa Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire, an empire that at its height controlled more than half of the world's gold supply, dominated the trans-Saharan trade routes, and administered a territory larger than Western Europe. He was, by any serious contemporary estimate, the wealthiest individual who had ever lived. His net worth, adjusted for modern purchasing power, defies reliable calculation. Estimates range from $300 to $400 billion, though these figures are necessarily approximate given the difficulty of translating medieval economic data into modern terms. And he brought all of it with him. The retinue that accompanied Musa Musa across the Sahara and into Egypt was, by the accounts of contemporaries, staggering. The Arabic historian and diplomat Al-Mari, who documented the visit extensively through interviews conducted years later in Cairo, recorded that the procession included approximately 60,000 men, courtiers, soldiers, servants, and officials. 12,000 of these were personal servants, each reportedly carrying a gold staff. 80 camels carried gold dust, each loaded with approximately 136 kilograms. The entire procession was dressed in silk, gold brocade, and fine cotton from North African weavers. Musa Musa himself rode a horse surrounded by 500 servants, each carrying a gold staff. Before him walked a further 500 servants carrying the same. When the procession passed through Cairo, Musa Musa distributed gold with extraordinary generosity. He gave it to officials, to religious leaders, to merchants he encountered, to the poor in the streets. He purchased goods at prices far above market value, seemingly indifferent to the cost. He funded the construction and restoration of mosques. He gave gifts so large and so numerous that the chroniclers recording the events struggled to maintain accurate accounts. His stay in Egypt lasted approximately 3 months. In that time, he distributed enough gold to cause economic disruption that lasted more than a decade. The mechanism by which generosity became catastrophe is a clean illustration of basic monetary economics. Gold in the medieval Mediterranean and Middle Eastern world was not merely a precious commodity. It was money, or more precisely, it was the foundation on which money operated. The value of gold currency was tied, ultimately, to the relative scarcity of gold itself. Merchants, states, and ordinary people conducted transactions, stored wealth, and paid debts in gold or silver currency whose value derived in part from the metal's limited supply. When Musa Musa flooded the Egyptian market with gold over a period of 3 months, distributing quantities that dwarfed normal annual production and trade flows, he increased the supply of gold in the regional economy dramatically and suddenly. More gold chasing the same quantity of goods meant that each unit of gold bought less than it had before. The purchasing power of gold fell. Prices rose to compensate. This is inflation, caused not by government policy or monetary mismanagement, but by the literal physical presence of too much money flowing into a market too quickly to absorb it. Contemporary accounts record that prices in Cairo rose sharply during and after Musa Musa's visit. The gold market specifically, the exchange rate between gold and silver and between gold and local currencies, was thrown into disorder. Merchants who had priced goods and services in gold found their revenues worth less in real terms than their costs. Savers who held gold found their wealth devalued. The disruption was not temporary. Al-Mari, writing about a decade after the pilgrimage, recorded that the effects on Egyptian gold prices persisted for 12 years. The Spanish-Moroccan traveler Ibn Khaldun, writing in the 14th century, described the economic damage in terms that make clear contemporaries understood exactly what had happened, even if they lacked the modern economic vocabulary to describe it precisely. Musa Musa, apparently aware that he had caused economic damage during his outward journey, took steps on his return. He borrowed gold from Egyptian merchants at high interest rates, and deliberately removed it from circulation, reducing the gold supply back toward its previous level. This is structurally the same operation a modern central bank performs when it raises interest rates and contracts the money supply to fight inflation. Musa Musa performed it intuitively, without any formal economic theory, in the 14th century. The Mali Empire that Musa Musa ruled was not an accident of geography or inheritance. It was a sophisticated economic and political system built on control of three resources that defined the medieval world: gold, salt, and trade routes. Gold came from deposits in the regions of Bambouk and Beret, in what is now parts of Senegal and Guinea. The Mali Empire did not mine the gold directly in many cases. Indigenous mining communities retained operational control of the sites, but it taxed production heavily and controlled the trade infrastructure through which gold reached the markets of North Africa, the Middle East, and eventually Europe. Salt, extracted from deposits in the Sahara at places like Tagaza, was equally valuable in sub-Saharan Africa. Salt was essential for food preservation in a tropical climate where spoilage was a constant challenge, and inland West Africa had limited natural salt sources. The Mali Empire controlled both the salt deposits and the routes by which salt moved south. The trans-Saharan trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa and the Mediterranean were the arteries of this system. Caravans carrying gold, salt, copper, cola nuts, slaves, and manufactured goods moved through the empire's territory, paying taxes at each stage. The empire's military power enforced the security of these routes against banditry. The safety of the routes made them the preferred path for merchants, which generated tax revenue, which funded the military. It was a self-reinforcing system. Timbuktu, under Musa Musa's rule, became one of the major intellectual centers of the medieval world. The Sankore Mosque housed a university that attracted scholars from across the Muslim world. At its peak, the city's population included tens of thousands of students and scholars. Libraries held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Musa Musa funded the construction of mosques and learning institutions across his territory, including commissioning the architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, whom he brought back from Mecca, to build in the distinctive Sudano-Sahelian style that still characterizes West African religious architecture today. The pilgrimage of 1324 placed the Mali Empire and its wealth on European maps in a way it had not previously appeared. The Catalan Atlas of 1375, one of the most important cartographic documents of the medieval period, included a portrayal of Musa Musa sitting on a throne, holding a gold nugget, with a caption identifying him as the richest and most noble king in all the land due to the abundance of gold in his territory. This was a European cartographer's acknowledgement, 50 years after the pilgrimage, that somewhere beyond the Sahara there existed a ruler and a state of extraordinary wealth. For European traders, merchants, and eventually explorers, the knowledge that West Africa contained gold on a scale that could collapse the Egyptian gold market in 3 months was commercially significant. The desire to access this gold directly, without paying the taxes and premiums charged by North African and Arab intermediaries, was one of the economic drivers behind the Portuguese exploration of the West African coast in the 15th century and ultimately behind the broader European age of exploration that reshaped the world. Musa Musa's pilgrimage, in other words, put West African gold on the European imagination's map. The consequences of that attention, the slave trade, colonialism, the centuries of extraction that followed European contact, are among the defining catastrophes of modern history. The life of Musa Musa contains a lesson that is easy to state and difficult to absorb. Power exercised without understanding its systemic effects is indistinguishable from destruction, even when the intent is generosity. Musa Musa did not want to crash the Egyptian economy. He wanted to be a generous ruler, fulfilling a religious obligation with a magnificence appropriate to his station. He was giving. He was devout. He was, by the standards of his time and culture, doing exactly what a great ruler was supposed to do. And he caused 12 years of economic damage to the populations through whose territory he passed. The gold he distributed was real. The generosity was real. The harm was also real. Systems do not care about intentions. They respond to inputs.